Dr. John S. Massey and Quality Hill Sanatorium, a Genealogy Gypsy interview with local historian Patricia Poland. Hi, I'm Gypsy Cole Houston, Union County Library's Genealogy and Local History Librarian. You can also call me Genealogy Gypsy. I'm honored to be here today with Patricia Poland, my predecessor, the former Union County Library Genealogy and Local History Librarian. She's also a general local historian, and I am happy to call her my friend. Hey, Patricia.
Hey, Gypsy, and she's my friend too. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Patricia is going to be talking to us a little bit today about Dr. John S. Massey, Union County's first African American physician. Could you tell our audience a little bit about, or a lot about, Dr. John S. Massey? Because they may not know who he is or was.
Be glad to. I love to talk about Dr. Massey. His full name was John Sherman Massey, and he was born in Lancaster County, South Carolina, to Thomas and Mary Massey. He was born in 1866, right after the Civil War. I think it's interesting that his parents chose his middle name to be Sherman, and he even shows up like that, I believe, on the 1870 census. Now, genealogists love to look at census records, and that's about the only thing that we can use to sort of understand where Dr. Massey was when he was a youth. So he does show up down in Lancaster County in 1870 and 1880. He is at school in the 1881. When they say at school, it could mean they're just attending a school nearby, but it also could mean they are away at school. It's interesting to note that in 1870, his father is listed as being able to read. They were real big on this in the censuses, the early ones, about literacy. They would ask, can you read and can you write? A lot of people could read but couldn't write. So, which was I always found interesting, but those are, though they go hand in hand, they are two different skills.
They're different.
So why his father, who would have been a slave or enslaved, might be the better word to use, already knew how to read, I don't know. Did he really learn to read in those 5 short years between 1865 and 1870? I highly doubt it. I suspect he already had learned how to read. Interesting also about his mother, Mary, when she dies, so many years later here in Monroe, North Carolina, because she is living with her son, she is noted as being a slave of a Reese Massey. Now, why they felt like that was important to put into her obituary, I don't know, except perhaps Reese Massey was a respected person in Lancaster County, South Carolina, or maybe they thought people would know of him or knew him. So we do know that he certainly was schooled. Dr. Massey was very literate. So we do know that he went to Shaw University later and then went back to the Leonard School of Medicine at Shaw University.
Okay. Could you tell us a little bit about what drew you to Dr. Massey, and how did you even learn about him in the first place?
Well, I first saw him in a book here in the room, and you can also check this book out. It's called Sweet Union, and it's architectural history. And they had a picture of his former hospital and his home. And I remember thinking, wow, a black man had a hospital in Monroe? So when I started digging around and looking, there's a very nice book that was done by the Union County Medical Association, I believe. I don't think it exists anymore. It was kind of a historical society. And they published 2 versions, a later one. But it's called Union County Physicians, and they list all the physicians that have worked and practiced in Union County up until at the time when they published it to the present of their time. And they just go in order by the years a person came here, not alphabetically. So I found Dr. Massey in there, and I noticed they said he was a Monroe native. And I think I must have already done some census research, because I thought, no, he's not a native of Union County. But they just assumed. They assumed he was from here. Other historians had done a little bit of research, because in the 80s, the Dillons had purchased his hospital to save it. It was sitting over on Windsor Street, empty. I think some people might have been living in the house at the time that was right next to the hospital that was Dr. Massey's home. But they were going to try to save it. They sold it to a developer.
Unfortunately, both the hospital and Dr. Massey's home were destroyed by fire before the preservation efforts could be completed.
But that made me want to dig harder on Dr. Massey. I said, we need to fix him. You know, they even had the death year of his first wife wrong, and I didn't understand that. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn more about him because, again, I thought, nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about this hospital that for some 20 years was the only hospital in this town. And I thought, how come nobody talks about this? So that is how I got started looking into his history.
Well, let me ask you this, Patricia. You've kind of answered this already, but what can you tell us about his history before he came to Monroe, since he wasn't actually from Monroe, and we know he was from Lancaster County, correct? So could you tell us what you know about his life before this?
I do know that he became a school teacher. And as far as we know, his teaching was mostly in Waxhaw, okay? Which, of course, is very near Lancaster County. And I believe that his family lived in that area of Lancaster that butts up against the Waxhaw area of North Carolina.
Maybe like Indian Land or somewhere near that area.
Yes, because they I know when his parents, we know this happened before he came to Monroe, his parents and at least one brother or two went to Liberia with a very large group from that community who went to Liberia. About, I don't remember the time, 1886 maybe?
Maybe, and that was the Curitan Store area, wasn't it?
Yes.
Curitan Store
and that is up near that border of Union County, the Waxhaw area in Union County. And you have to, and another thing that's very confusing is that whole area straddles the line. So you have the Waxhaws, and they are in South Carolina and in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So we know that his parents went there, but at one time people thought Dr. Massey also went. I don't think so. I believe he was teaching, or he might have even still been in school and was just getting ready to graduate with his teaching certificate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I believe because he was here earning money, he was able to earn the money to help send to them, because, you know, they sent you to Liberia free, but if you wanted to leave Liberia, you had to pay for your passage back home. Most of them, there was no way they could scrape up that money. So we know that his brother wrote a letter to John Welsh, who lived down in that area of Lancaster County.
And was John Welsh a white man?
A white man, yes. And he told him, we're not doing so good. We're literally starving to death. Please help us. So apparently Mr. Welsh went out and talked to the people that knew the families, and particularly the Massey family, because there was two sets of Massey families. Katie, the woman he eventually marries, her parents go also, and siblings, and then we think Katie herself went. We're not sure about that, but definitely her parents went too. And they came back. They managed to get some passage back. But we later learned from an obituary of A.W. Heath, who was also a white man from that area, that he was known to have helped get the people back from Liberia, to help send them money. So I think it was a pool of money.
Right.
I believe Dr. Massey's, of course he wasn't a doctor then, I think John Massey sent money in. I think a lot of people sent money in to help get the people back. Dr. Massey's father dies in Liberia. We don't know the date. We don't know where he's buried. So this we don't know, but his mother and brother come back and are actually interviewed, and this appears in a New York paper. When they are let off in New York, they're actually interviewed, and she said anyone who could get the money would definitely be coming back. It was not what they thought it would be. So we know that happened. We know that he was a teacher. There was a big push in the black communities all over America that it was time to start being able to doctor ourselves. I mean, you already doctored yourself with a lot of herbal and folk medicines, that they wanted to see professional men be, black men be doctors, women to be professional nurses. It was time for the black community to step up and do this. And there was a big push. And for a long time, I thought maybe Dr. Massey just kind of fell into that and thought, yeah, this will be a good way to make money. But I later decided that was not exactly the case. I believe this was a calling. I truly believe it was a calling for him.
I'm not sure if you can tell, but Patricia is passionate about Dr. Massey. I often kid and call him her boyfriend, her historical boyfriend, but she is very passionate about Dr. Massey, and that's why I wanted her to share what she knows about him. So I really do appreciate it.
I will say one more thing. We have those letters. You know,
Right.
we have copies of the letters that he wrote
Tell them about
before
the
he
letters.
came here. And we do have those to his future bride, Katie. He worked very hard at wooing her through these letters. But she was much younger than him, and I suspect he scared her very much. When he was a school teacher in Waxhaw, telling her that he had gotten his job, he was teaching at his old stand. So it was obviously a place that he had taught before. He says, I have already bought land and a house, and I'm building it for us. Is next February okay to be married? That didn't happen. So, bless his heart, you know. If you would read the letters, they're very sweet. You know, eventually the letters cool somewhat, because I guess she had rebuffed him enough that he no longer felt like that she was interested in him. And when he writes, the last copy of the letter that we have is 1896, and he is here in Monroe. And he simply just tells her that he has opened his practice, and he's very busy, you know, and perhaps he will see her at church. They were members of AME Zion, and down there in Lancaster was where she was still a member of, and apparently there were conferences, and that's when he would see her. You know, so we do know that too.
Copies of Dr. Massey's letters to Kate can be found in our scrapbook, John S. Massey, First Black Physician of Union County. The scrapbook is available during the regular operating hours of the Dickerson Genealogy and Local History Room. Let's talk a little bit about Dr. Massey's impact to Monroe and Union County, and also to the African American community, but the greater community as well.
I have to guess at what did he do for the African American community. Certainly, he began to care for them physically and probably mentally as well. We know that by 1915 he's acquired an x-ray, which I think is one of the coolest things ever, because that's the first x-ray machine in this town. You know, we haven't mentioned, I don't mean to interrupt, but we hadn't talked about his hospital. No, we haven't.
So we probably need to go back to talk about the hospital.
Backwards, don't we?
Before we
to
talk
understand
about
the impact of the community. Mm-hmm. So he obviously had this dream that he wanted a hospital. The town itself had tried to have a hospital around 1905. This was by several white doctors, and one would drop out and another one would step in. They didn't build one. They simply took over the third floor of an existing building, which no longer exists, of course. Seems like everything like that is gone. Mm-hmm. But they took over the third floor of an existing building. It was called the Ashcraft and Stewart Sanatorium. You need to understand about the word sanatorium. Today, we believe that's where people that need mental health.
Yep, exactly what I thought when I first heard this story.
But it simply means that it is a place for you to convalesce. In other words, it wasn't a place to just get treatment and then he sends you home. It was a place you got your treatment, and if he felt like you needed to stay days or weeks, then you did. So there were 10 beds in this hospital from the get-go, we believe. So anyway, he decides that he wants to build this hospital. The other one simply just kind of disappears. It might have lasted 5 years. It would close, it would open, it would close. It was never successful. I believe the doctors wanted one, but they didn't have the heart for it. And I believe Dr. Massey had a heart for this, very much so. That's why I began to change. I began to think, I don't think he was doing this just because he thought, oh, well, I can make more money. Mm-hmm. I don't think Dr. Massey made much money at all with this hospital. Unfortunately, he took a lot of charity cases. He was one of the charity hospitals. So he opens this hospital, scraping every penny he can get, asking for help from the community. And I do believe he got that help. Some people believe he got some of the equipment from the hospital that didn't make it. But we know he went out and bought his own x-ray machine 3 years later. He opens this hospital in 1912, August of 1912. It's very pretty, very fine-looking hospital. And 3 years later is when he goes to get that x-ray machine. Now, I got very lucky on that. I would have never found that myself. I had a patron in here who was very skillful at doing internet research. I've never known anybody who could find something on the internet as well as the late Jack Clay. And he stumbled across a digital article from a paper called the New York Age, which mentioned that Dr. J.S. Massey of Monroe, North Carolina, has come to town to purchase an x-ray and an electrical massaging unit, which I would assume is chiropractic-like, and I believe he had some interest in the muscles and bones, but really it's muscular more than anything in chiropractic work. So I believe he must have had an interest in that as well. So yes, I believe as far as that, he did do for the community in that respect. He was obviously trying to be as modern as possible. He had a surgical suite. I mean, this is really interesting that he did this. He knew he was going to need that for his patients. Unfortunately for him, and all over the country, the black community was so ingrained to going to white doctors and believing that the white doctor was smarter and more intelligent. It was a hard road to hoe for a black physician to say, you know, I'm skilled too.
Right.
You know, but I believe he must have proved that as time went on. I really do. As far as the greater community, well, he built that hospital and it was successful. Successful enough for him to expand it and add more rooms and a whole other wing by 1930. So it couldn't have been a total failure or he wouldn't have done that.
You know, are there some rumors that he may have also treated white patients?
I think so. I believe, if you've broken your leg and they're not sure where that break is or how they're going to do it, do you really think you're going to get in the car and drive to Wadesboro or to Charlotte when there's an x-ray machine right there on Windsor Street? I believe so. And we know that he worked with some doctors here and there on some cases because that's noted in some of the Union County Medical Society minutes, which you can get online through digital NC. So, yes. Do you want me to tell the story that the patron told me?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
We had a patron, and he came in one day. We have, in here, we have the very top portion of Dr. Massey's hospital. It would be known as a finial, and it's made of tin, so it was at the very, very top. He had like a tower on the corner of his building, and this was on the very top. And this patron came in one day, and he was white, and he said, he looked over at the finial, and he looked at the pictures that I had of the hospital. He goes, I know that place. He said, my daddy took my sister there. And I was like, well, now that was a black hospital. He goes, I don't care what it is or what it was. He goes, my sister could not walk. We didn't know what was wrong with her. My father had took her to all kinds of doctors. No one could do anything for her. All I can tell you is that my father carried my sister up those steps to that hospital, and when she came out, she walked out. I guess that electrical massager thing, I don't know. After all, the patron was a little boy himself, but he was older than his sister, and this really made an impression on him. So that's why I believe that, yes, there were definitely probably some white patients were treated there as well.
Patricia, I know that Dr. Massey was what we believe the first African-American physician in Union County. But by the time he passed away, we had other African-American physicians. Could you tell us a little bit about some of his contemporaries?
I will. One of the first was Dr. Thomas Craig. Now, he was a native of Waxhaw, North Carolina. And he and Dr. Massey actually they have a little office down in Waxhaw to see patients, and they rotate and take turns on one day a week seeing those patients. This was as early as 1904, I believe. Yeah, 1904. Eventually, Dr. Craig moves on. I don't know why, but by the time he dies in 1949, which is going to be about 3 years after Dr. Massey. He was practicing in Charlotte, but they said in his little obituary that he had practiced in Monroe and Waxhaw as well. It might be at one time, perhaps they were even partners. The picture of Dr. Massey, the picture of Dr. Massey's hospital, which you should be able to see back behind us up there. There are 2 men and a woman. The woman is a nurse. We don't know her name, but I'm sure this picture was taken shortly after the hospital was opened, because that's what you did. Mm-hmm. This was a postcard, and that's what you would do. You would take a picture of your institution and put it on a postcard, and this was sort of a card that you could hand out or mail out to people for drumming up business for whatever you have built. So I think that the man possibly that we see, I believe Dr. Massey is up on the top step, but we don't know, but that's what I believe. And the man who is down on the bottom step with one leg up, I believe that might be Dr. Craig. That's just me guessing. Right. So now Dr. Kraft, and that's spelled C-R-E-F-T. For a long time I thought it was C-A-R-A-F-T because everybody pronounces it Kraft.
But it's really spelled Kraft.
Right. Dr. Hubert Henry Kraft, H.H. Kraft is usually how you'll see his name. He came here just about when that hospital opened. Oh. I've often thought that the reason he came was because of the hospital. Why wouldn't you? If you were a black physician, why wouldn't you want to go to a town that has a black hospital? Mm-hmm. So now he was a pharmacist when he arrived. He came from Grenada. And he also went to the Leonard School of Medicine, and I feel certain that probably Dr. Massey encouraged him to go to his alma mater, Mm-hmm. And so then he becomes a physician, because in Grenada, a pharmacist was like a doctor. Okay. But when he got here, that wasn't the case. Now, there was a black-owned pharmacy in town called People's Drug Store that Festus Cuthbertson, the pharmacist, owned, and he sold some of Dr. Kraft's products. Dr. Kraft still made medicines, salves, and other things. Oh. So that, I wish we had, wouldn't it be cool if we had some little bottles or something that had his labels and stuff on?
So if anyone out there has any, we would love to see them.
Then the white doctors, there were quite a few, but Dr. Stewart comes to mind, H.D. Stewart. He apparently, I think he befriended Dr. Massey. I really do. Mm-hmm. And then there was a Dr. Stevens. Now, these 2 men were about 6 years younger. Dr. Massey was older than a good many of the doctors here. Not all of them. There were other doctors that had been here at the time, like Dr. Bedwine. And I couldn't tell you. I'm not a medical historian for this area. Another contemporary was W.C. Heath, William Crow Heath. I believe that he was definitely a friend of Dr. Massey's. They were both born in the same area the same year. Mm. And the reason I think this is there was a time when Dr. Massey got in trouble in 1915. And some obscene letters were sent through the mail from the Monroe post office. And a lot of the physicians got them, including Dr. Kraft. And the postmaster got a hold of him and decided he would have to haul for some reason they blamed Dr. Massey for these letters. And so he got hauled before what is the name of it? The U.S. It's something to do with the post office. Okay. Commission, some kind of commission. Okay. And when this happened, I'm going to see if I can find the article for you, because the Beasley brothers, they're the ones who published the Monroe Journal. And that is all we have to go by for our research in early years, because unfortunately the Monroe Inquirer, both of them had fires and lost a lot of their papers. So we're left only with the Monroe Journal, which, except for the little small thing that announced that Dr. Massey paid for, and I don't know if he paid for it, but he announced, it was a little tiny article, that's why I'm doing that, announced in the opening of his hospital in 1912, you don't hear or see anything in the newspapers about Dr. Massey's hospital, which always puzzled me. But every now and then the Beasley brothers would write something about Dr. Massey, and you can tell that they have great respect for him. So the name of the place that he had to be to, it was called the United States Commissioner. That's who he had. He had a preliminary hearing in front of him. the U.S. Deputy U.S. Marshal was there. The Assistant District Attorney here in Monroe was there. And, of course, the Postmaster was there. There was no evidence connecting Dr. Massey to the letters, so the commissioner just promptly dismissed the charges. I'm going to read this so that I don't mess it up. The remarkable thing about the matter was the array of character witnesses who were present to testify to the good character of Dr. Massey. There was fully a score of the leading business and professional white men of the town, and most of them had come without being subpoenaed. They all gave the defendant a good character in no uncertain terms, and some of them had known him from boyhood. And that's who, I think that was W.C. Heath. And several of them were physicians. A man, black or white, who so lives that he can establish a reputation like this, has something to fall back on that cannot be estimated in money. So you can see that, and they do this again in 1925, something very similar, not him being taken before any kind of hearing. But you can see that the Beasley brothers, Roland and George Beasley, had a good deal of respect because they wrote the paper. There were very few reporters, and they never put their bylines, so you have no idea who wrote it, but it was them. So I do believe that one who knew, at least one who knew him from boyhood was probably W.C. Heath. Then there are other doctors, was like Dr. Alston, but he comes later, and that's spelled A-L-S-T-O-N. He was a dentist that many, many people loved, white and black. White and black went to Dr. Alston for their dental work. But he doesn't come until after World War I. Okay. But he would still be considered a contemporary.
Right, I think so.
Absolutely.
So, Patricia, tell us a little bit about, this is unscripted, but tell us a little bit about this notebook that you spent time on. And then I want to ask you the question, which is there more research to be done? And you can see all the research that she has done. And this is available inside the Dickerson Genealogy and Local History Room. If you ever want to learn more about Dr. Massey, you can come and ask for this to use inside the room. We also have a brochure and a little history vignette that you can come and pick up. These you can take home. This you have to use in here. But so, Patricia, tell us about the research you have done, and then tell us if there is more that you think needs to be done. And if so, what would you like to explore further about Dr. Massey in the future?
So the notebook came about, and it's just called John S. Massey, First Black Physician of Union County, a scrapbook, because I kind of kept it in chronological order, but there are some areas like the letters that we've talked about that he wrote. We just have copies, but they're color copies in quite beautiful handwriting, I might say. There's a Liberia section. There's a section about family information that we've tried to look up and do. It came about because there isn't anything really about Dr. There is no book. This is cataloged, so if you put in John S. Massey in our online catalog, it will also come up. But you'll see that it's available in here, and you have to look at it in here. But it's a great resource. We pulled articles. Anytime we found anything, there's some North Carolina health reports in there, and that's how we learned how many nurses might be working at a certain time in his hospital and how many beds. And like, for instance, when he had the 10 beds, I think he had 3 nurses. We don't have that today. There will not be 3 nurses for every 10 beds, as you well know.
Right.
You know? And he charged like $1. $1 or $1.50, you know, if you weren't a charity case, you know. So, but anyway, this took a long time. I had a lot of help from the late Jack Clay, who found a lot of articles, and I really believe he was probably the main person who helped me do
Mr.
this.
Clay.
And then stuff that I had found, thank goodness, like the Liberia one, there was this wonderful database online that listed all these people that had come from the Curious Story. It's gone. That database is gone, but thank goodness I printed it out.
Right.
Or we would have nothing. You know, so it helped us there to do the research that we needed to do. Research. One of the first things you learn in genealogy and local history, and there's always more to research.
There's always more.
Always more. It's never ending. But if I could, I'd like to know what was the relationship between him and Dr. Stewart, who seems to have befriended him.
Okay.
Dr. Massey shows up in the Union County Medical Society minutes. Now, this is an all-white medical society in like 1903. And I've had another historian tell me that she does believe he is the first black physician in North Carolina to be part of an all-white medical society. Impossible to prove.
Right.
But she's never come across anything like that either. So someone had to have invited him.
Right.
And I believe that probably was Dr. Stewart, who was a bit younger than him, but still close enough in age that they probably were very similar, you know, and had grown up in a similar manner. The other thing would be, when he opens his hospital in 1912, that little small article that he has in there inviting everybody to come to the open house, you know, come see what we have. And I want to thank my many friends. Who are those many friends? He doesn't name anybody,
right.
But it has to be white and black, just evidenced by that 1915 article about all those
right.
people who came forward to testify to his good character.
Right.
You know, so I'd love to know that. I want to know, when did Katie finally decide that she would marry him? Because she does, and we have no record of the marriage, which means they got married in South Carolina, and the records, early records, marriage records, are pretty much non-existent for South Carolina
right.
marriages.
And he remarried after Katie passed
just
away.
Just a year or so. That is, I was fond of telling people, old men, they don't like to be alone. They gotta have somebody to help cook and clean.
I think this is a good time to tell you that the views expressed by our interviewee are not necessarily the views of the Union County Library or Union County government. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you for that. The other thing is I was told by someone that his medical cabinet and some papers were at Shaw University.
Oh.
When I called them some years ago, because they do have their catalogs, the catalogs are online are just a list of the students and where they're from and what were they taking, what program were they in.
Right.
And Dr. Massey is in there, J.S. Massey is in there. And they said, that's all we have. So I'm thinking, and now I didn't know about the medical cabinet until some years later, and I thought, well, gosh, they didn't tell me about that.
Right.
And when I said that to this person who was telling me, he said, they better still have it. So I don't know. I can't, I would like to know. That's part of our problem. We don't have any records.
Right.
And what happened was, this is my opinion, but I've seen it enough in genealogy and doing genealogy research. This seems to be a pattern. Dr. Massey dies in 1946, and 1 year later, his only son dies. When that happens, and that was an unexpected death, of course, and his son Clarence was also a physician, the only black physician in Wadesboro for a very long time. That's where he set up practice. You lose that thread. You lose that person, the one who's going to care the most about your stuff and your papers. It's possible that at that time, that's what I think, is that the medical cabinet was probably with Clarence, his son, and that somehow they must have said, well, here, do y'all want it? Well, if it was that long ago, in the 40s, I hope it didn't get gone, but maybe it got passed to somewhere else, and the provenance of it, the ownership of it got lost with it, and nobody knows. They just know it's old 1930s medical cabinet, but they don't know where it came from. So I wonder if it's something like that. The letters.
I was going to ask you to tell that.
Yeah. There was a white man who loved antiques who was just strolling through Wadesboro, North Carolina. And he saw this beautiful, small, antique roll-top disc in the window of a black beauty shop. He went in there and he said, hey, will you sell that disc? They said yes. He bought the disc. He took it home and stuffed, way back in the back of it, were these love letters. All written to Katie. We don't have the letters that Katie wrote to Dr. Massey. Those, we don't know where they are. But obviously, this desk must have belonged to Katie.
At one point, yeah.
And then it got passed on to her son.
Mm-hmm.
And then his widow used it, I guess, until she died. And I assume that's how, because this was like maybe in the 70s or 80s when he found the desk, maybe the 80s. It was a long time. Well, there wasn't a lot out there on Dr. Massey.
Right.
As the internet grew, I had done a program, a PowerPoint program on Dr. Massey for SBCC, and it had been advertised.
Mm-hmm.
And the son of this man, doing research online, John S. Massey, because he kept seeing that in the letters, up popped that advertisement for that, and he contacted me. I started to cry when he called me. He said, "I've got these letters from a J.S. Massey to Katie." And I went, "Letters?" I said, "Katie, that's who he married." He goes, "Well, you can't tell that by the letters." No, you can't. You can't. And, of course, there's no record of it.
It seemed like an unrequited situation reading the letters.
Yes, it just seems like poor Dr. Massey had given up there at the end. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I would like to know if anybody has his papers or if they do have that cabinet. That would be really something to find.
And he doesn't have any heirs that we can trace, right? We don't know.
Well, he had adopted a niece. Now, I don't know if this was a niece of his wife or him. His wife's maiden name was also Massey. I have not been able to connect them, and that doesn't mean anything at all. I mean, they could have been cousins, and so I don't know if this niece was hers or his, but they do legally adopt her. Her name is Thelma, and she marries a man named Mr. Galashaw, and she and her husband and her son, Reginald, they live with Dr. Massey here in Monroe for a year or two before they move on. Okay, they go to Virginia. And Reginald, that grandson of Dr. Massey, goes into the military and retires from there. He dies in the 80s. His mom dies probably in the 70s. So could we trace? Yes, Reginald had several children, and I've looked at that obituary many times and thought, could I find one of those great-grandchildren? Because maybe they have something. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have the letters that Katie wrote. Right. Okay? So I would love to, and they, I guess whoever they are, they've never done any, or if they have done any research, they haven't contacted anybody here about it. So yes, so that's more research that can certainly be done. Yeah. Trying to find them.
What do you think is Dr. Massey's legacy?
For me, never give up on what you want to achieve. You know that he had obstacles when he was going to build that hospital. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he had naysayers within his own community who said, "They ain't going to let you do that, or you're never going to get that done." He was working against Jim Crow. He had financial ills. Grief was in there. All these things, and he never stopped. He never stopped being a physician and a doctor and caring for his community. It looks like he practiced as long as he could, and I think that's remarkable in itself. So for me, never give up on what you want to do.
We all wonder who's going to tell our story. And I thank you, Patricia, for telling Dr. John S. Massey's story.
Thank you for saying that. The city put up a historical marker at the site of his home and hospital. I believe that this would never have happened without my big mouth.
Well, thank you for your big mouth. And would you like to tell them
I have one more thing that I think is exciting news, and I'll try to keep it very short. But there is a program with the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, and they have a civil rights trail. And they have been awarding markers for civil rights sites in North Carolina. A limited number of markers. They are in their last year of awarding markers now. We got in on the 2021 cycle, and it was a local black group known as A Few Good Men Incorporated. And I wrote the essay for it and the bibliography and filled out the application. And that got submitted back in October. And it was awarded. It will mark the site of a former public swimming pool that is at the Monroe Country Club. And this is one reason we chose this, because currently that former swimming pool is a putting green in the lower parking lot. Most people don't pay any attention to it, but eventually it got filled in and became a putting green, but the curbing for the pool is still there. This was a contentious time in 1961. Robert Williams was the local NAACP president. He was a civil rights activist that was born here, and he organized the group of youth, and he would take them there to march around this pool. What happened was the pool closed and never reopened, and sat there empty for almost 20 years before finally they thought, well, let's fill it in and make it a putting green. Robert Williams' name will not appear on this marker, and there is a reason for that. We tried to keep his name clear for a future state highway marker.
Right.
Somebody else has said they are going to do this, and so hopefully they will. He's a teacher out of Durham, but he's a Union County native. So that is why his name isn't there, because if his name had been on this civil rights trail marker is not a highway marker, then he would not be eligible for that state highway marker. And a state highway marker is far more prestigious. Now, I realize that there would be no swimming pool marker without him, and we acknowledge that fully.
Right.
But I couldn't even put his name in the essay. If I had put his name in the essay, he would have been disqualified for a state highway marker. State highway markers are very particular, and they're not an easy thing to get. And we do have some in Monroe, and I'll just say it very bluntly, they're all to white men. So it's very important that Robert Williams does get, and hopefully will get, a state highway marker in the future. But nevertheless, we're very proud of this marker. It will be dedicated maybe late spring, but I'm thinking more like summer or early fall, but certainly before November this year. So please look out for that.
Right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Remember that you can visit the Dickerson Genealogy and Local History Room. We're open Monday through Saturday. We'd love to have you come in. You can learn more about Dr. Massey. You can learn more about the marker. You can learn more about Union County history as a whole. Please join us. Thank you. Want to know more? Visit the Dickerson Genealogy and Local History Room at the Monroe Library. Here you can find out more about Dr. Massey, find out about other fascinating Union County history, or start climbing your family tree. Our hours are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thursday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We look forward to seeing you.